Set in the 1960s Alabama, an orphan young boy stumbles across a conference of witches while staying with his grandmother at a hotel and gets transformed into a mouse by the Grand High Witch. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot here today to share with you all my spoiler-free review of the new HBO Max Robert Zemeckis, The Witches, starring Anne Hathaway. Very excited to let you all know what I thought about this movie and if you should check it out in this spoiler-free review. Before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you all can stay up to date on what's going on over here at Movie Files. If you are new to this channel, welcome to the community. Make sure you all subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss any of my other movie reviews, TV coverage, live streams, all the fun things we do on this very channel. Make sure you all give this video a thumbs up. Really helps out the channel, but also really appreciate it. And in the comments below, let's discuss this film. Let me know your pros, your cons. I haven't read the book, nor have I seen the 1990 movie, so let me know which one you prefer, and let's have a discussion about it in the comments. So as I had just mentioned before I get into my positives here, I haven't read the book, nor have I seen the 1990 version, which I plan on watching, which I believe is on Netflix. I'm going to probably watch it this weekend, but I'm coming into this film with a clean slate. Now, I've seen the images of the 1990, of the, the makeup and all that stuff, and I'm familiar with the premise, but besides that, I'm pretty much new to this clean slate of Robert Zemeckis' adaptation of this book. So going into the positives, first and foremost, I was hooked within this first half of this film. When you see the relationship and the backstory between Charlie, who has something that happens, very tragically happens to him at a very young age regarding his parents, which makes him live with his grandmother, played by Octavia Spencer. That relationship to me was the heart and soul of the film, and more so in the first half of the film, where, I'm not gonna lie, I connected to that story because I had a personal, really close connection with my grandmother who, passed away. But the relationship between Octavia Spencer as Agatha, as his grandmother, Charlie's grandmother, it was just so refreshing to, number one, see an adult not play into the tropes where they don't believe the kids when it comes to witches and magic. And, there's a reason why Agatha believes him, without getting into spoilers, but I just really found that relationship to be so authentic and so adoring, so charming. And again, I just liked that she was just there for her grandson, and also I loved the little life lessons she gave him, which I guess this transition to Octavia Spencer, which I found to be the most endearing, most charming, most believable, most caring character of the film. And I mean, we all know Octavia Spencer is an Oscar-winning actress, and she's just phenomenal, but I really found her character to just be, again, it may be a little bit biased because I connected to the character because she reminded me so much of my grandmother, just being so loving and dancing with Charlie and trying to get his spirits up. And I really enjoyed that relationship in that first half between Charlie and his grandmother, Agatha. And I just thought that relationship was very strong within that first half of the film. Another performance that definitely comes to mind, and it'll be really interesting to see the general consensus of Anne Hathaway as the Grand Witch, which, again, haven't seen the 1990 movie, nor have I read the book, but I had a fun time with this character. Once you meet her, once she goes to the hotel, she interacts with Stanley Tucci. I just found her character to be very menacing at times, very funny at times, and I just thought that Anne Hathaway was having a good time in the role. And I'm personally a fan of Anne Hathaway. I think there's like a mixed reception on her as an actress or as a person, but I love Anne Hathaway, and I have no shame in saying that. And I just thought that she had a really good time in this role. You could tell that she had a fun time. She was really embracing the character and really hated children and really hated her interactions with Stanley Tucci as the manager, Stringer. I just really had a good time with her, and I thought her performance, there is one thing that I had an issue with, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but overall, I had a fun time with Anne Hathaway in this role. Now, rounding out my positives, the direction of this film by Robert Zemeckis, which, I mean, come on, this guy's resume speaks for itself. He dominated the 80s with Back to the Future trilogy, with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway. I mean, the list goes on and on. This man is a great filmmaker. I don't know if he's like top tier for a lot of people, but I enjoy his films. And Zemeckis' direction was there at points. I found like his direction was at its highest point, again, in this first half of this film, where it kind of embraces the horrific moments of this story, the more mature levels of this film. I thought that he really kind of shined through. And also this film was written by Robert Zemeckis, as well as had a hand in writing from Guillermo del Toro. And again, that first half of that film to me was when the film was at its best. It didn't really play into the tropes of a kid's family movie. It kind of was mature, kind of scary and menacing, and I enjoyed that aspect of the direction from Robert Zemeckis. Now, transitioning into my criticisms with the movie, this might be a minor thing for some people, but listen, I love the composer of this movie, Alan Silvestri. He is a icon, and I mean, him and Zemeckis have a history. I think he's pretty much scored all of Robert Zemeckis' movies. I had a problem with the Avengers orchestra playing throughout this film. This was literally Endgame and Infinity War all within the film, and it just didn't fit within the film. It was almost overpowering the scenes. And again, I love Alan, don't get me wrong, but I felt like his presence, his Avengers presence in particular, was just too overwhelming for the moments that they had to score within the film. Kind of going into some of my other criticisms with the visual aspects of the movie, I thought the visual effects were mediocre at times. And again, compared to the pictures I saw of the 90s witches and their makeup being taken off, this one with the smiley faces was fine, but I found the visual effects, again, to be kind of mediocre at best. Now, getting really into the meat of my criticisms here, I found the other witches, besides the one witch in the grocery store very early on in the film, they were just background actors. I don't know in the novel or in the 90s film if the other witches are more integral in the story, but literally I don't even know why other witches were involved in this movie because they had nothing to do with the plot, which was pretty disappointing, which also kind of goes into my overall issue with this film, which is the lack of character development. And I'm referring to in particular our kids in this movie. This is a kids movie, and I know when I was a kid, which made me love some of the kid movies I grew up with, was I related to the kids. They were fun. They were adventurous. Now, again, I get why Charlie is the way he is at the very beginning of the film and how he kind of embraces the adventure and becomes more of a, adventurous kid of a sense. But I just found like Charlie, which, by the way, there's only 2 kids in this movie, which I don't know if that's lack of, if that's a creative choice or if there's not that many kids involved in the movie or in the 90s movie or in the book, but there's only 2 kids in this movie, and that's Charlie and Bruno. And I just found them to be very stereotypical. Again, you understand why Charlie is the way he is. He eventually opens up due to his grandmother really kind of opening him up and being happy and being cheerful and being who he wants to be in life, things like that nature. But I found, Bruno to be very kind of plucked out of Charlie and a chocolate factory. Just the kids to me were very bland. And it just goes into, besides Octavia Spencer, maybe even Stanley Tucci, and the adults. Most of the adults to me were more richer and a little bit more interesting than the kids were. And I figured that shouldn't be the case because this is a kids movie. And I'm being frank, I didn't really care for the kids in this movie. And then a couple little things that I want to wrap up with my criticisms. I mentioned it with Anne Hathaway. Loved her performance, had a fun time with her, but her accent, her Russian accent was so inconsistent and it was just so over the top at times. And now, I know this was part of the plot, that it was meant to be like a funny joke when you couldn't understand her because she was having this Russian accent, and they even play it to it in the movie. But there were a lot of times in this movie where I just couldn't understand her, and it was kind of getting on my nerves. And it was just a little thing, but it was something that stood out to me. And then the last thing here is when it comes to one of the biggest things, I mentioned that I really was hooked into the first half of the film, but unfortunately, that second and third act to me just became just a very bland, thin script. The movie became a more so of this horror kind of very intriguing, interesting, compelling story, and then it just becomes this video game. And I mentioned the lack of character development when the kids become the mice, and if you see the trailer, you know that's not a spoiler. But I found like the turn into a mouse just became so easy. There was no development of it. They just were experts at being mice and running around. And it just became, like I said, I felt like I was playing a Rugrats video game when it became that second and third act where it just became very bland, very generic, and less compelling compared to the first act. And that really kind of upset me because I was so intrigued in that first half. And then it just became, it almost seems like someone came to Robert Zemeckis and was like, hey, can you focus more on the more kiddie elements and the more family fun elements? And let's not focus too much on the characters or the story or the world building, which really lacked that. I mean, there's a bunch of witches in this movie, and none of the witches have a presence in this movie outside of Anne Hathaway. So it was just like, there was something, it was a mix of witchery in a bowl that could have been something good, but it seems like they just stopped themselves from making something really fun, which is really unfortunate because I was really interested in that first half. Overall, for me, I thought the first act was really fun, really endearing, really scary at times, had a fun time, but as the film kind of goes on, it becomes less about the horror, the story development, the character development, and more so about just this video game-ish, mouses doing these little missions. All it was missing was like checkpoints and auto saves to become a video game movie. But it's unfortunate because I really had a good time with this first half, and I do like the performance for Octavia Spencer, Anne Hathaway, Stanley Tucci, but the kids really didn't feel that fun and adventurous and very bland, and the story honestly became very bland. And I'm really intrigued to see this 90s film to see what's the difference between the two. But overall, I'm going to give the 2020 version of The Witches, directed by Robert Zemeckis, a 2.5 out of of 5. Now, Elliot, why are you being so hard on this kid's film? It's just because, again, once you see this movie, I was so invested in this story in the first half. And as it kind of went on to this less compelling, kind of just really very cheesy, generic, very bland, dumbed down kids movie, that's why I'm being hard on it. So it had a lot of potentiality, and don't get me wrong, I still love all the cast members. I'm still a Robert Zemeckis fan. Alice Silvestri, I love them as a score, but I just felt like this film just was just too disjointed for me personally, and that's why I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. But that's just my thoughts. It's on HBO Max for free. Check it out. Let me know your thoughts on this film, your pros, your cons. Which one did you like more, this one or the original? Let's have a discussion about that in the comments below. As always, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other videos. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you're having a great day. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.